So here is the overview of a research essay. You've got your outline structure, your thesis, your evidence, your transition words and sentences, conclusion, source or works cited, and you have your notes. We're going to go over the research essay. Let's start out with outline structure. Essentially, you want to frame your introductory paragraph with the thesis statement included. It's going to be a solid hook or lead-in quote, or keen or even somewhat controversial or direct observation. So you sort of have like a wide bird's eye view. And it could be a single sentence, a mini paragraph, or anything in between. That's generally what is common, and it happens too in journalism. It's a little bit different. The nomenclature is a little bit different, but it's similar. You want to hook the reader by the lapels early, and get them into the story. You know, the who, what, where, when, why, and how. And sometimes you just want to cut straight to the chase. Like, this happened, and bang, 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 in journalism. So it's a little bit different. The research essay, you definitely, because it's going to be sort of, you're going to unwrap this argument, and you're going to be defending this argument throughout the essay. You want to have sort of a accessible, interesting hook to bring the reader in. And then once you've got your reader's attention, you work your way into the text, how the author deals with the issue or theme, etc. Remember the thesis statement. Your whole paper has to follow this key statement. So you want to, you don't want it to be too simple. I normally recommend bringing a little bit of nuance. So you want to say while, although, despite the fact that blank. I mean, I'm really a big proponent of nuanced thesis statements. I think that it really adds dimension to a paper, as opposed to just, Walt Whitman showed, his passion for war in his diction in this poem. It's still pretty sort of simplistic. I like to show a little bit more dimension, a little bit more nuance. You could say, while minimizing the atrocities of war, comma, blah, 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 and I do have another class where I do talk about a specific Walt Whitman poem called Drum Taps, and we do cover the thesis in this class as well, so we'll go over that. But your research essay, you want to have the lead in to what your paper's going to discuss in order of how you're going to discuss it. In the outline structure, you want to have body paragraphs including contextual, thesis, supporting evidence. Make sure they're in order of how you introduce them in your paragraph, your intro paragraph. You want to have transitory sentences. So you want to say, however, furthermore, moreover, this raises the question, although blah, 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 comma, blah, 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 despite the fact that blah, 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 so you really want to sort of gussy up your writing. I even try to do this in my outline. I even try to write like a transitory sentence, the beginning sentence that is a hook from the previous sentence to the sentence you're introducing. So I think it's, you can obviously say additionally, once in a blue moon, but most of the time you really want to have a solid transitory sentence for each body paragraph. And then your essay conclusion, this is all part of your outline structure as well. You want to restate your thesis in a different way. Again, I go over this a lot more thoroughly in other classes, and you'll be able to access them as well. But yeah, I mean, this is just sort of the general overview of a research essay, and you generally want to open it up and speak about society as a whole, like a bird's eye view, or you want to bring it in really closely, like like just a very super close up view. So you want to either bring it back or tighten it up, bring it in tight. So either way, however, you want to make sure you want to come up with some kind of an aha or epiphany. I remember for the drum taps, it was a Walt Whitman poem, and he was very positive on the community forming aspects of war, of the Civil War. He doesn't, it's not an anti-war poem per se. It's actually a little bit more, the language is a little bit more celebratory of this specific war. But I didn't just talk about, it's celebratory. I was like, okay, well, he focused the language and this and that focuses specifically on the community forming aspects of war. So I tried to make it as specific and granular as I could in terms of the thesis, and then the conclusion wasn't anything fancy. I basically recapped the thesis in different words, and I might have made one or two sort of additional points, but the big point that I made was that, although I'm a pacifist and I'm reading this, poem, 100 years later, he almost made me want to strap on my boots and fight in this war. And that was the conclusion. That was the concluding sentence. So it wasn't world-changing, amazing conclusion. And not every essay, you're not going to find in every essay, you're not going to find that brilliant conclusion. A lot of times your brilliance or your solid analysis should be in the body. The conclusion, doesn't have to be world-changing. If you're able to hold that ace of spades, however, and just have this unbelievable, beautiful aha or epiphany in the conclusion, and it fits there, that's ideal, right? If you can have this great body, great intro, great thesis, great body, and then boom, you've got this great epiphany or great home run that you've sort of held in your pocket until the conclusion, that's awesome. But that's not always going to happen. And I don't want you guys to feel like, oh, well, if my conclusion isn't showcasing some brilliant analysis, then I'm not going to do well. The analysis should be in your body. The conclusion, you should just not drop the ball. You should be able to at least make it presentable. And yeah, so, you want to end with a bang, not a whimper. So mine was kind of a bang where I was I basically just showed the contrast between who I am and how long it's been since this war happened, but just the fact that reading something so powerful, almost made me want to, to step into the fray and fight for Manhattan. Essentially, it's the city of Manhattan, but fight for Manhattan, as he says. And that was basically it. So, it doesn't always have to be a big epiphany. It can just be something that you connect to either yourself or your local community or your society or the author or the author's contemporaries or to your neighborhood, your country. I mean, there's a lot of ways, to come up with that aha. But we'll learn more about this as well in different classes. But this is just sort of the basic research essay sort of structure. So the last thing we're going to cover in this lesson is the hook. It's frequently the first sentence of a research essay or part of the first sentence. It can be an interesting quote, an obscure fact, a statistic, famous words, or famous last words. Remember, the hook has to be representative of the rest of your work. The reader is here to read your words, not someone else's, no matter how wise they may be. So that essay about drum taps that Walt Whitman wrote, I believe this was the first sentence. Infamous U.S. President Richard Nixon once exclaimed, "War is heck." And so even though that's a separate time period, and I bring it back to Whitman and the Civil War, etc., I think it still works because later on in the conclusion, I'm bringing it to a little bit more contemporary time period, where I'm talking about myself. Even though this was still a while back, a couple of decades ago, I mean, it's still somewhat contemporary, and it still can work, I think. So that's something to keep in mind. You want to have a hook, but essentially, when I say war is heck, I am making that leap and saying, oh, well, this president said that war is heck. However, as a contrast, Walt Whitman's poem Drum Taps isn't showcasing war as heck. It's showcasing like the beauty of the community coming together to fight for a particular war, for the Civil War. And again, I'm not arguing like with Walt Whitman. I'm not saying, oh, Walt Whitman shouldn't do this because, I don't believe in war. That's not the point of an essay. The point of a research essay is to share what your thesis is, which could be right or wrong based on what you believe, but you're not writing about yourself, you're writing about the author. What did the author mean when they said this? What do you think the author meant when they, so even if you totally disagree, that's what a good research essay covers, is it covers what the author meant and what, whether it's a movie or a book or a poem, etc. You're really focusing on that. And then in the conclusion, you might have room to talk about yourself, and how maybe you wouldn't agree or whatever, because you're, but not in the body, not in the thesis. I think it's stronger if you just focus on sharing what is the evidence that suggests that your thesis is right on. And your thesis has to do with what the author's, not really their intent was, but where the evidence, is strong. And it's pretty obvious in that poem. Like every line, it's really obvious. And these poets, they make it very obvious too, that he was focusing on the positive aspects of war. And that just stood out. So you want to look for what stands out when you're reading a book, or reading a poem or whatnot. What stands out big time? Is it, loyalty above all else? Is it, people are going to, cross you no matter what? I mean, what themes, look at, symbolism, look at the plot. I mean, you want to look at the plot, especially in a book. But in a poem, it's more about like explicating the lines and really seeing what is the general gist of this poem. What's the tone? What is the author emphasizing? Because these authors, they're not all over the place. Usually they've got a couple main points or focuses or emphasis, pieces of emphasis, and you just have to figure them out. They don't have like 27 pieces of emphasis in one short poem. And they usually, especially stuff like Whitman, I mean, the classics, American or otherwise, like, they generally have solid attributes in terms of being able to explicate them and talk about, oh, this specifically seemed like a main focus of this essay, or this essay rather, this poem or this book. So thank you very much.